Welcome to the 9 Elements podcast, brought to you by Restore Hyper Wellness. I'm your host, Eric Hinman. Each week, I sit down with trailblazers in the fitness, nutrition, and wellness communities, exploring how they optimize their daily lives for ultimate performance to do more of what they love. I'm a 5-time Ironman athlete, brand builder, and someone who's obsessed with health and wellness, structuring much of my day around fitness and recovery protocols. On today's episode, I chat with Robbie Balenger, an ultra-endurance runner who outran the life of a Tesla battery earlier this year. Robbie has recently started a media hub for endurance athletes known as the Audacious Report, and his idea of a casual weekend is running a 26.2 mile marathon. In this conversation, we discuss how a first date turned Robbie into a runner and much more. What got you into running? Because you were in hospitality in Austin, right? You owned a restaurant or were a chef at a restaurant.
Yeah, I was part owners and oversaw operations. I was always more front of the house, just hospitality side of it, and spent my 20s doing that into my mid-30s. In that experience, I was really good at hosting people and I was really good at partying and enjoyed that part of my life. But there became a moment where I was just kind of burnt out on being at the bar all the time. And in that same time, I met a girl and she invited me out on a run, and it just resonated very, very deeply with me as a way to just express myself and kind of get out a lot of my built up tension in a way that wasn't drugs and alcohol. And that was just the beginning, and it just progressed until now I'm a professional ultra endurance athlete.
Wow. So a first date is what got you into running.
Pretty much. Yeah. And now she's my wife.
That's
so
amazing.
All worked out. It was good.
That's so cool. So that first run, were you immediately hooked? How far was it? I'm assuming you had run prior to that, but maybe just not for any kind of duration?
Yeah, I grew up playing team sports, so running was always an aspect of that. I loved football, but I was actually an offensive lineman, believe it or not, in high school. And then, we went on a 2.5 mile run, and it was all I could do. But I really loved the outcome. I loved the way I felt. I felt accomplished. It was like I now talk a lot about how running to me is the inverse of a drug. Like when you do drugs, you feel great while you do it, and then you feel really terrible afterwards. And with running, especially when you're getting started in it, you often feel terrible while you're doing it, but I can assure you, you're going to feel great afterwards. And that equation, that resonated with me. And it was something that helped me to find a better version of myself. And I just got hooked really quickly. It progressed quite fast. It was that 2.5 mile run. A couple months later, I ran my first half marathon. A couple months after that, my first marathon. And ultras came within about a year and a half. And just keep pushing the distances longer and longer.
I love it. I like to call it type 2 fun. And I completely agree with you. And not only is it rewarding after, but it's a snowball effect in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. So, you go for a run, then you may want to do a recovery session that day. You're probably going to eat better. You're going to sleep better. You're going to make better decisions. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have more motivation. Whereas the adverse with alcohol and drugs, you might feel good in the moment, but then you're going to eat like shit. You're going to sleep like shit. You're going to wake up the next day, probably make some poor decisions. And then it takes 4 or 5 days to get back on track. And, if you're drinking and doing drugs 2 or 3 days a week, you never really get back on track. So I always...
Vicious cycle.
Yeah, it is. They're both a cycle. And you can either pick a cycle in the right direction and suffer in the moment, but have rewards after, or, suffer after that 2 hours of fun that you had. And it's kind of a life of suffering.
I totally agree.
Yeah, my story with exercise was back in my triathlon years, and same as you, I was big into the party scene, and that for me is what fueled vulnerability, and I thought that was fueling the best version of myself, because I would be funny, and I felt on, and I felt like my mind was clicking, but then, I'd wake up the next day and be like, wow, I made some really bad decisions last night. And then when I got into triathlon, it progressed very similar to yours, where, I started with a sprint triathlon, and within 2 years I was doing a full Ironman, and it was really just like progress. I think Tony Robbins coined it, saying that progress is happiness. And for me, I loved that I could control the progress with it. Your results are directly correlated to how much purposeful practice you put in. And you don't have a team. I mean, with an endurance race like what you're doing, sure, maybe you have a team, your wife, your pacers, and, you need to have a little more people out there. But, with an Ironman, it was very much just like, hey, I'm training year round for this event. I have a goal on the calendar, and every single day I'm just going to move the ball forward a little bit so that when I get to that starting line, I know that I can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It gives you some structure to your day, to your life. And the more you get into it, the more everything kind of folds into that being the emphasis. That's the thing. And yeah, it's a beautiful space to be in for sure.
And I think some people say, you're addicted to exercise. And I think addicted is a negative connotation. An addiction is doing something that is unhealthy for you. And is my whole life based around health and wellness? Yes, I'm obsessed with it because I'm obsessed with feeling my best or, close to my best day in and day out. Obviously, we're going to have down days and we're going to have things that don't go our way. But ultimately, 90% of my year is I'm feeling pretty damn good because of sticking to that structure and prioritizing health and wellness.
Absolutely.
So Robbie and I are on the 10,000 squad together, and you did a feat of strength this year in which you outlasted a Tesla. You want to tell us a little bit about that endeavor, a little bit about the prep for it?
Yeah. So the premise of the run was to outlast the battery life of a Tesla 3. And it really just the Tesla set a visual marker, kind of something that people could really start to grasp the distance. And the idea being is the Tesla would go ahead on a pre-described route until the battery died, and I would have 72 hours to surpass that distance. So going into it, we weren't quite sure exactly what the distance would be. Ended up being 242 miles. And I hit the ground running, and it was in Texas. It was in April, but it was an abnormally hot April for Texas. So I battled the heat quite a bit. That was really kind of the factor that made the challenge super challenging. I did not actually hit my goal of 72 hours. It took me 77. But in retrospect, I think that was really the big character build for me during it was, when you're out doing these big runs, you're always doing math in your head about time and everything. And about halfway through, was it pretty obvious I wasn't going to hit that 72-hour goal. And it opened up the opportunity for me to quit. But I chose not to, and instead to see it through. And I just think that was a very important thing to do for me. And it's a parable to life is we don't always know, things don't always go to plan, but it's what do you do with that? And a lot of, I think where success comes through is through follow through. And I saw it through.
Agree. Do you write reports after each of these endeavors, a race, an event like this? Do you go back, a day later, a couple days later, and write a full report of everything that went right, everything that went wrong, your nutrition?
Not really as much as a structured report. I do find that after big events, I'm usually very inspired to write, and I usually write in short form. It shows up a lot in my social media.
Sure.
And it's everything from, more logistical kind of aspects, and then also a lot more from the more spiritual kind of, where those things that come out through these. And that's one of the reasons that I gravitate towards these big things is the clarity and the growth that comes out of them and how I'm able to articulate that afterwards. So I usually get a couple months of inspiration, and then I kind of find that there's a writer's block for me. And it usually means it's time to find a new challenge, something big to do so that I can learn more and then hope to inspire others through the thoughts and actions that come out the other end.
You're certainly inspiring a lot of us with the things you do. With my Ironmans, I used to always write a race report the day after. And, it was probably a little different than what you're doing because you're often doing new endeavors and challenges. You're not doing the same race every year. But, for me, it was doing Ironman Lake Placid to qualify for Kona. And that was kind of the roadmap every single year. And after the race, I would write that report so that the following year, I could read that in the days before the race and literally, I would visualize exactly how I was going to correct everything I did wrong the year before. And I mean, it helped me tremendously in doing that. Obviously, there's some mechanical things that can go wrong, and you have some other variables that would be within an Ironman. But within an endurance event like you're doing, I mean, nutrition is so important, and pacing and heart rate, and understanding how you're going to feel, and understanding how you're going to overcome that feeling, of that devil on your shoulder that you have to wipe off.
Totally.
So that helped me a ton doing that.
No, I definitely take a lot of mental cues and remembering and refining every time. Every time I think I get a little bit better at it, but then also with each event, usually humbled by what I didn't get right, and do take that and translate that into life in general. I think that's a huge part of this for me, is the parables of these events that we can translate into everyday life to become better people. And then, try to come to the next one better than I was the time before. Like, I did that Tesla challenge, and since I've had a hard year, I sprained my ankle twice, had to focus a lot on recovery and getting through that. And then this past weekend took on a race down in Mexico, made it 99 miles in a 111-mile race, and had to pull out. And so I'm now reflecting a lot on why that was, what I can learn from it, how I can come more prepared for the next time, so that that's not what stops me. Maybe there's something else that I'll need to learn, but it sure won't be that. It won't be what stopped me this time.
So what was the decision to stop in this most recent race? Was stomach issues, any physical ailment, or was it more mental?
It really manifested itself in my feet. There was some poor communication from the race going into it, and no one was really aware that there were going to be 22 river crossings in the latter half of the race. And there was no crew. I didn't have any crew with me. I went solo. And in that, I just didn't do the foot care needed in order to withstand that much moisture and that high a mileage. And so now really honing in on how to take better care of my feet during big efforts, especially when moisture is going to be a part of it. But also at the time when I ended up pulling out, I was 40 hours I had been awake and had hit a little bit of like a mental break, kind of like psychosis started to set in. And no one should stay awake 40 hours, especially when putting in that many miles. So a lot to learn, like foot care, and also like how can I get some micro naps in there? How can I just rest while continuing to push forward? Sure.
Was it blisters from the moisture?
Yeah, it was so much moisture. My my feet got so saturated that the whole bottom of my foot was just a blister essentially. Yep. And it was the point that at the last stop, I did pull off my sock, and a medic was like, "You're probably going to lose the sole of your foot if you continue." And I just couldn't really reconcile that being worth it at the time. I think had I had my normal crew with me, we would have found some workarounds, but being out there kind of alone, I couldn't. I just decided it was best to hang it up for the day.
Yeah. I mean, I think you made a smart decision, especially if it's going to impact the longevity of you being able to do this. I know in the moment and in the days after, you beat yourself up a lot around this stuff. I had a really bad race one year in Kona, my first year of Kona, and the entire race wanted to quit. And, I was glad I didn't, and I beat myself up for days after. And then I came back the following year, and I learned my lessons, and I crushed it. And I think this is just going to be a speed bump, a learning lesson, and something that you're going to be able to take and improve upon and do better, in your next challenge. So I would look at it as a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where character shows itself, right? And that's what we have to do, is no matter our setbacks, take those, learn what we can from it, and move forward being a stronger, better athlete, better person. And that's definitely what I'm going to do. Yesterday, I'll say it was pretty hard. I definitely struggled with it quite a bit, but already today starting to see that there are some positive learning, things to be learned from it. And I'll come back stronger next time for sure. Yeah.
So we chatted about this a little bit offline before we jumped on, but I was listening to an Andrew Huberman podcast yesterday all about dopamine. And it's interesting understanding the science behind some of these endurance events or feats that, are going to give us a pretty big dopamine spike because of, the level of adrenaline that we're operating on. And, you've had many monumental achievements throughout life, but that Tesla was, something no one else has done. And it's interesting that that doesn't set us up for a year of high. You have a high immediately afterwards from accomplishing that. And then what happens is your dopamine levels go below baseline after doing something like that. And I remember with my Ironman races, always an extreme high afterwards, especially if I did well in them. And then there would be a week period where I felt pretty down. And, postpartum depression you hear about, and all of this is because, you have dopamine is like a currency. And, when you spike that currency, it doesn't just go back down to baseline. It goes below baseline when you spike it like that. So when doing things like this, you're going to have some downtime afterwards. And I think it's important to recognize that it's just the evolution of what you're doing to the neurochemistry in your mind, and to understand, hey, tell your wife, tell your kid, whatever, that you might have 4 or 5 down days after one of these things. But hey, I'm going to be back to normal.
Yeah, totally. And I've learned that over the years. And I think for me, a lot of it is the ability to identify it and see it coming, and then, not be surprised by it. And therefore you can work through it a little bit better. In 2019, I ran across the United States. It was a 75-day effort. And this was my first venture into really big multi-day runs. And I assumed when I finished that everything was going to be great. Birds were going to be chirping, the rainbows, and life was just going to forever be good. And the reality is I hit a funk. 75 days means that lull lasted 30 days, if not longer. And it surprised me, and it affected every aspect of my life. But luckily now I know it's going to come. Yesterday was really, really dark, and a lot of that was due to not accomplishing my goal.
Yep.
But now, even just a day later, I'm able to identify, just to what you said, is this is part of it. You pushed your guts out for 40 hours. You're going to have a lull.
Yep.
And just learning to be okay with that, and it's part of life. And the more we can navigate these things eloquently and not let it overtake us, the better we're going to be for other aspects of life too.
Can't agree more. So in that 75-day effort across the country, I know you use a technology called NuCalm for rest and relaxation. Talk a little bit about the recovery routine for a multi-day event like that.
Well, that was, if we speak of NuCalm, the way I found out about NuCalm was just after my transcontinental run. I finished in New York City. I was invited to a recovery gym there, and they utilized NuCalm for high-performing athletes and people within the business world. And I went into this gym, and they asked me how I was doing, and I was having a real hard time cognitively and emotionally. I was having a hard time keeping up with conversation, navigating the city. And they were like, we have something we think you should try. And so they laid me down with this system. It's a 3-part system, essentially operating mainly off of these neuroacoustic software. And I laid down, and it brought my brain into theta waves, where we go during meditation. And I was able to get into a restful state for about an hour and 20 minutes. And when I came out of it, it was the best I had felt since I'd started the run. And that was very powerful to me. And from there, I ended up partnering up with the company to see what it would be like to use this in other big events. And now it's something I utilize pre, often during, and then definitely after, to kind of balance the autonomic nervous system and find that clarity and find that rest that I need in order to come back my best self. And it's a powerful tool. It's something that I value quite a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I get a deep tissue massage at least every other week. And if I'm getting close to a competition, I'll get it every week. And for me, that deep tissue massage, the 90 minutes, I think it's almost more important that I'm just completely tuned out and relaxed for 90 minutes. My nervous system feels so good afterwards. The next day I feel so energized. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about with this is you need that deep rest and relaxation to feel energized again the next day, because you're taxing your nervous system so much in doing things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about recovery, and there's all these forms of recovery, but at the end of the day, like, the most primal, the most basic is rest. Rest is recovery. So when you can find tools that allow you to do that and optimize that, as NuCalm does, it's amazing. It's a great tool to have.
So the Tesla endeavor, are you sleeping at all during that? Are you doing little, naps? What does rest look like for a 72 hour, 76 hour, 242 mile run?
For that, it was, just shy of 77 hours. We kept up with it, and I had 4 hours and 10 minutes of downtime, all of which I utilized NuCalm. We did some of their shorter tracks, and it allowed me to, as soon as I would hit, we had my van with me. I would lay down in the van, we would put on the system, and boom, right away go into this real rest meditative state, come out, and it would really just reset me completely. Everything from emotionally, mentally, and like fatigue wise to much less lactic acid buildup. There were a couple times where we simply used it because my legs were getting so heavy and full of lactic acid, and taking that time off and allowing that parasympathetic nervous system to engage even for just a moment really helped me to come back and feel fresh. So you really, really have to focus on that rest side of things, especially when you're getting into multi-day moving your body. That was the first time where it was like not like full 6 to 8 hours of sleep before I would start again. Like when I ran across the US, there was a full night of sleep, but this was like balls to the wall. Let's get there as fast as possible. So it was micro naps here and there.
What are you monitoring during it? Are you monitoring your heart rate? Are you doing any kind of lactose testing? What different things are you monitoring throughout something like that, a 3-day run?
We're checking. I pay a lot of attention to heart rate. You really want to stay zone 2, because anything above that for this type of event, there's nobody that can physically hang on that long.
What are you averaging? What's zone 2 for you? What average heart rate are you targeting?
For Tesla, I averaged 110.
Okay.
So that was about where everything averaged out to. If I started to see major spikes and I wasn't like purposely pushing really hard, it meant we needed to recalibrate something, which often could even be just hydration. Like hydration can affect that quite a bit. And if it was something we couldn't regulate, it was a good sign that maybe it was time to take a couple minutes to really come down, reset everything, and then start off again. And hydration,
how many ounces of water were you looking to get each day? Were you drinking water? Were you drinking a Gatorade? Were you drinking electrolytes? How much sodium were you looking to get each day?
For that one, we were using predominantly BPN, Nick Bear stuff, Bear Performance Nutrition, his hydration mixes, and the one he has with some calories in it too, the GM1. And with that, it was so hot that it was just literally like just forcing me to have it almost constantly. There was a pacer with me essentially the whole time after mile 20, and they were both carrying 2 bottles and I was carrying 1, and it was just a constant reminder, put more in, pour more in. So there were no like strict metrics, but just as much as possible.
Gotcha. What about caffeine? Are you targeting a certain milligram of caffeine throughout something like that, just to keep the stoke semi-high?
So I really that was actually that effort in particular, the Tesla effort was a pivotal moment for me for caffeine use. Prior to that, I always felt as though the more caffeine, the better. Like in multi-day long things, even 100-milers, it was just like get jacked up and stay jacked up. But along the way, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Harvey Lewis I spoke with, who's a very, very accomplished ultra runner. And he was like, be careful because it also increases your heart rate, which can decrease performance. So I really tried to be really cognizant of not overdoing it with the caffeine, and I think it lent itself to a better outcome. And so probably less than I was probably putting in less than 100 milligrams per 24 hours. And just, this last effort, again, I was awake for 40 hours. It had been like 30 hours into the effort, and I think at that one I may have done about 150 milligrams of caffeine.
Wow.
So for me, I'm finding doing very low.
Interesting. Are you using beta-alanine or L-citrulline, any other type of stimulants to keep you going?
No, I stick with really these whole food like based gels. So Spring Energy is really my go-to right now, and Huma. That, and then just hydrating as well as possible. I stick with Scratch most of the time, and just and salt too. Salt is something that this effort, I think I was lucky. I ran with a couple people for the majority of the miles, and one of them had extra salt tabs. I left town without them, went down to Mexico and didn't have any. And it's really important to keep those up. It's amazing how much, it's not just about cramping. It can actually really, truly affect performance. So that's one of the lessons learned from this one, is just really trying to get about 300 milligrams of salt per hour.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. All of the sauna sessions that I do now, I've really had to up my sodium intake because of, multiple workouts a day. And then I probably sweat the most in my sauna sessions in the evening. And I'm upwards of 3,000 milligrams or more sometimes of sodium in order to keep performance high and keep from cramping and to feel good again the next day. So I think people often overlook, the electrolyte component of it. I think people understand, probably they don't adhere to it, but having at least a gallon of water every single day, but also having some electrolytes in there if you're doing sauna sessions, if you're doing multiple workouts. Wow, I'm blown away with the lack of caffeine to keep going in something like that. In my Ironmans, I would target about 800 milligrams of caffeine, to be in my bloodstream at any given moment during that race. And, so much of it for me was to keep the stoke high because, as you know, and anyone else who's done any kind of endurance event, not only is your body breaking down, but your mind is breaking down, as you get further and further into these events. A 110 heart rate is not high. And what that means is your body is breaking down and your mind is breaking down. That's what's limiting you from continuing to go. And the caffeine for me would always keep the stoke high. And, as the hours crept up, I would feel like I needed to get that high more often, even though it would last shorter and shorter amounts of time. Even just that cup of Coca-Cola that they serve on Ironman on the marathon course, I'd have a 1 minute high from it and then, a 7 minute lull. And, you just kind of look forward again to that next mile of that 1 minute high from that cup of Coca-Cola. Totally.
No, I get it. And so how long are we talking for an Ironman? How long?
I was typically 9:30 to 10 hours. So obviously vastly different than, running 24 hours, 40 hours, or running for 3 days straight.
Yeah. And I'd say, like, if I'm doing a 50 miler, that's about the time it would take for an average 50 miler, or a challenging one with some elevation. I would crank probably more caffeine then. But when you're pushing it out multi-day, it wreaks. I realize now in retrospect, the times where I did it, it kind of wreaked havoc in some areas of my performance. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. I guess I can see how it would affect. It does affect your next day. My next day is horrible after an Ironman. I feel like shit. So I guess I get it from that standpoint of like, you have too much, then you might feel like shit the next day, and you need to feel good, relatively speaking, for several days doing something like this. Walk me through your mental game for something like this. So for me, I would set mini goals. Like I said before, I basically would just focus on the next mile, and I would focus on how great that cup of Coca-Cola was going to taste on the run course, for a minute high that I would get for it. Or I would think about my family, that I would see in 3 miles, or I'd think about the beautiful view I was going to see around the course. Like, I feel like you have to constantly keep tricking your mind into being excited to continue going. So, walk me through your mind game for something like this, because I think that's the biggest component of it.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I really rely a lot on gratitude, and I try to stay in a very positive headspace as much as possible. And being grateful for, one, the physical ability to do the things I do, and then also the community that I often get to bring around me to do these things. I think you mentioned, like, getting to see your people at the next aid station. That is huge for me. I rely heavily on that. And then also it's breaking things up into smaller pieces. So it really gets about like going from aid station to aid station, and going back to like the largest effort I've ever done running across the United States. I ran across the United States in 5-mile increments. Every 5 miles I would see crew. They would give me more hydration, a little bit of food, and that was what it came down to. It wasn't about running 3,175 miles. It was about running 5 miles, 5 miles, and that allows it all to become manageable. I think you really have to do that. You have to break these things down in endurance events. And then it's like, what are the small like treats, pleasures that you can give yourself along the way? Really thinking through your nutrition and thinking about it from a performance standpoint, but then also having some things in there that you just love. And maybe it's that those things are going to evolve and change throughout the race. So having a variety of things available, that helps me a lot. And, I'm finding that the community aspect also of other athletes is important. Often I do big audacious events that are just me against myself, but when it's in a race environment, this race I just did was the first time ever that I've opened myself up to running with other people. I didn't see that coming, but I got out there and it was a really challenging course, and no one had crew or pacers with them. And I paired up with 2 other runners pretty quickly and spent 24 hours with them. And it really made it so much more manageable, enjoyable, and honestly possible to, even though I didn't finish it. It's why I made it as far as I did. So that's now something I'm going to think more about, is like, how can I utilize the other people out there as like a community? We're all in this together. We band together at times to make it the distance. But yeah, the mental game is huge. And for me, again, just to reiterate, gratitude. I think we all can practice more gratitude in life. It's easy to get down, especially when you're depleted, but we're so privileged to get to do these things.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That was something I always wrote in my race reports is, what brought me happiness during the race? What thoughts brought me happiness? What people, what environments, what experiences, so that, the next Ironman, Lake Placid, I had all of those to reflect on. And I think that's so important. These positive distractions, these mini goals, and these little, things of pleasure. Like I very rarely had it, but I would have like a Snickers bar and, one of my aid station bags. So I knew I had that to look forward to. And I don't know if this happens to you, but I would have a lot of thoughts early on in an event. And then as the race went on, my thoughts would become more singular to, the final 10 miles in the Ironman marathon. All I would think about is chocolate milk, like how great that chocolate milk was going to taste at the finish line. And throughout it, it's like, okay, I just got to focus on one thing now. I'm going to focus on the next aid station, and I'm going to focus on how amazing that chocolate milk is going to be at the finish line. That was what got me through my Ironman marathons.
I do that. I quickly start thinking about that post-effort meal.
Yeah.
Dreaming about food. It's usually pizza.
Yeah.
But and you start fixating on it, and it gets you there. And also, you do this a little bit, and you start to realize that so much growth comes through it. And kind of falling back into that. When it gets hard, being like, well, this is where the growth's going to happen. So don't shy away from the pain, from the discomfort. Lean into it, because you're going to get something great out of it. And I think that helps me now as well. When you're first starting, you don't realize that. You're like, this is horrible. Why did I do this? But over time, you learn to embrace it a bit.
Can't agree more. I remember after my first Ironman, I wrote a social media post, and I said, doing an Ironman is so much more than just, swimming, biking, and running this unfathomable distance. It's such a tool for life of I can accomplish anything if I dedicate 10,000 hours to it. If I make little mini goals, I can reach this major goal, and it's just backtracking into it. I want to run 100 miles. Okay, how do I do that? What do I do every single day for the next year to backtrack my way into it? That is so important for business, relationships, anything. And mental resilience and grit. I think grit is something that is so overlooked with some of these things we do. And if you subject yourself to some of these stresses, when a bad stress, comes at you in life, a family member is sick, you're going to be able to handle it so much better by self-imposing some of these stressors. So the grit that it gives you is tremendous, and that's going to help in anything in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's like it provides this space for repetition for the hard times in life. Like how do we get better at anything? It's through reps. So if you can put yourself in a challenging situation purposely, that's a rep. That's a repetition for when shit hits the fan in life, and you do handle it better due to it. I know I don't freak out in life about the hard times as much as I did prior to getting into running and becoming an endurance athlete. And it's practice. Practice makes perfect.
Drinking the recommended 8 glasses of water daily is a great way to maintain your body's hydration, but consuming diuretics such as caffeine and alcohol can offset your hydration. Roughly 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated, and the effects of being dehydrated are staggering. As an endurance runner, Robbie Balenger knows the value in continual hydration and why it's important to optimize your water intake. From fatigue and mental fog to kidney stones and even more complex issues, dehydration can lead to consequences if left unchecked. However, there are more ways to do more for your body's hydration than just sipping on an extra glass of water a day. Restore Hyper Wellness has 3 modalities: IV drip therapy, NAD plus IV drip therapy, and hydrofacial to help promote hydration, energy, brain function, and boost skin clarity. 9 Elements listeners can receive 20% off your first Restore service using the code ELEMENTS20 when making your first appointment. That code again is ELEMENTS20 to save 20% when booking your first service with Restore. So training for a 200 plus mile run, what is the furthest you're running leading up to it? And are you doing back-to-back long runs? How are you compounding that fatigue to prepare your body for that stress?
Well, it's interesting. Like what I'm finding now is every big effort I do is essentially training for
the next one. Gotcha.
Right. So like in a lot of ways.
Yep.
So it's changed over the years. But we'll talk about Tesla specifically. For that, I wanted to lay down big mileage every day. And the idea was to find that sustainable pace. It's really hard at times to run slowly.
Yeah.
So what I did was I was like, okay, 6 days a week, I'm going to run 20 miles. And for the first couple of weeks, the pace was faster than what I was going to need it to be for Tesla. And I was essentially breaking my body down to where I've hit a place of fatigue where I was forced into that slower pace, and also was learning and normalizing what it was like to run tired. And so very basic in that way, that it was just like big mileage every day and then recover in between as much as humanly possible. And then it just changes. It's because everything I do is a little bit different. For this 100 miler I just did, it had a lot of elevation gain. I realized most of the race would be more of a power hike than a run. So for the previous month, I just spent a lot of time doing these big mountains that I am lucky enough to have right here in my backyard. I've been doing 14ers like 3 or 4 days a week, just, slowly cranking up them and getting down them a little bit faster than I went up them. And I really do think had I not had the foot issues, this was going to be one of my better performances in a race. And a lot of it was just like, just slowing it down and getting in that like zone 2 cranking gear.
Compounding consistencies. I was chatting with someone at the gym today. He's doing his first half marathon, and I made the mistake early on in my running in triathlon of going too hard. I would just go too fast, and I wouldn't do the type of volume necessary because I was going at a 160 heart rate for all of my efforts because I thought that was exercise. I was coming from more of a CrossFit type background. And I hired a coach, this guy who was beating me in all of the local triathlon races. I hired him to tell me why he was beating me, and it was because I was going too fast, and I wasn't putting in enough volume. I wasn't building durability. I wasn't building an aerobic engine. I was just burning a lot of calories, and I was probably increasing my lactate threshold, but that doesn't really matter when you're talking a 10 plus hour event. It matters how long can you sustain that 110 to 130 heart rate. And he slowed me way down, which allowed me to do a much, much higher volume. And I think it was also important to understand that it's not just like, running fast once a week and running long once a week. It's much better to do 6 days per week of sustained efforts that are just compounding that fatigue. And that is going to build durability. That's going to build the aerobic engine. And that's also going to generally help with not getting injured, because if you run too far and you haven't built your body up to that distance, you might get injured. And if you run too fast, the same is true.
I couldn't agree more. I was actually just having this conversation earlier with a friend, and we were just talking about consistency. And I think that is the key to success in endurance, in anything in life, really. But, as I was getting into running, I would do similar to what you say. Like, I'd go out and run a little too fast a couple days a week, and then I'd do a long run, and I'd suffer through that and break down throughout it. But I was still maybe getting out 3 days a week, maybe 4 if I was lucky. And I had a friend who was more experienced than me, and he was like, man, if you would get consistent, then you would just get out there, and maybe you do less mileage every day, but you do it 6 days a week, you will see improvements in a way you haven't.
Yep.
And it was so true. It was so, so true. Like, finding that time every day to get after it at a lower intensity is definitely the route to success.
Agree. So I think anyone in endurance sports has probably battled with overtraining. How do you know if you're overtrained?
For me, I think it's you can tell, there's a level of fatigue that's smart, and then there's a place where it's just there's a depletion that you have to start listening to your body and your mind. And I don't know if I can really articulate exactly how you know it, but anyone out there that's getting into sport, getting into endurance, first and foremost, you need to start paying attention to your body. You need to start thinking through, how am I feeling? And there's just a threshold to where if you're waking up and you're still fatigued, then your recovery plan's not on point, or you're overdoing it, and you just need to hold off a little bit.
Yeah, I found for me that if there's sustained days of zero stoke when I'm getting into a workout, that means
if you're
I'm
not excited about it, we all have days. We all have days where it's I don't want to do this. But if it's day after day, and this is something that prior you loved, you need to take a step back, and you need to find better ways to recover in between.
Yep. Yeah. And my metric generally is 15 minutes. Like today, for example, was a really good one. 15 minutes into the workout today, I hadn't dropped in. I wasn't really excited to be in the gym. We hit some really hard workouts yesterday, and the last month has been very high volume and very high intensity leading into this high rock season. And today, 15, 20 minutes in, I was missing some weights that I can typically do pretty easily. We started doing the conditioning piece. I wasn't feeling it. And I'm like, today's a back off day. I don't need to stoke my ego and hit the reps that are listed on, my program. I'm going to back off a bit because I know I'm not stoked for this and I'm not feeling great. And that's generally when injuries happen. So yes. I think it's understanding, is it a motivation issue, or is it a stoke issue from overtraining? And for me, that metric usually comes about 15 minutes into a workout, whether or not I'm able to drop into it. And if I'm not, then that probably means I'm flirting with injury and I'm a bit overtrained, and my nervous system just isn't ready to take on stress for that day.
Yeah, and don't beat yourself up about it. Pride yourself in being smart and listening to your body instead of always muscling through. There's a time and place for that, and it's not during training most of the time. Yeah, you're setting yourself up for performance on the big day, and that's when you really want to go all out.
Can't agree more. And, we have HRV, and there's a lot of these metrics, and I think they're great. But ultimately, if you've been doing this long enough, I think it just comes down to understanding your body and understanding. Feel is just so important with all of this stuff. I know that you were monitoring your heart rate, but you probably know what your heart rate is, while you're out there. It's not like you're looking at your watch every 5 minutes. The feeling. And same with me. I've done this long enough that I know the feeling, and ultimately that is the best metric for whether you should be, going harder and longer, or, easier and less.
Yeah, totally.
So do you have an off season? Do you take any time off? So after doing, what do you, the 89 miles, are you going to take a week off, 2 weeks off? Do you do any kind of cross training to, keep the aerobic capacity, but to help your legs recover some?
After really big efforts, I'll definitely just let myself off the hook. Like I'll just get out there when I want to.
Just have fun.
It's like, it's like if I want to run today, I'm going to run today. If I don't, it doesn't matter. And I'll have, I usually don't set like a time limit on that. It's till I feel like, okay, it's time. I'm ready for something else. For what I just did, I got in the 99 miles, but I think I'm going to run the New York City Marathon. But as far as cross training, you mentioned cross training. No, I don't do any cross training, and it is time that I do. I have decided that I am 38 years old. I've been very linear in what I do for the last 10 years, just been running. And I want to be in this sport for a long time. I want to be active for my whole life. And I see now that that's going to require me to start getting in the gym and doing some stuff other than this one thing. So I'm kind of at a precipice in life where I realize it's time. It's time for me to do those things. I'm excited about it. I've never been excited about that idea before. So not now, but if we talk about this in 6 months, I think I'd have a much different answer.
Dude, I love hearing that. Absolutely love hearing that. I would recommend cycling if you haven't got into cycling, especially for
now that is something. That is something I do. I find post big efforts, I usually go through a cycle where for a couple months or so, I tell the whole world that I'm now a cyclist. I'm obsessed with it. And that's all I'm ever going to do again. And then I end up falling back into running, and the bike lays off and gets a little dusty in the garage. But I really enjoy it. It's the low impact is really great, but I still get to keep up my cardiovascular strength. But I think it's time for me to hit the weights a little bit too. I right pre-COVID, I got in a pretty good routine for about 3 months where I was in the gym and focusing a lot on core workouts. And it really, really translated into trail running, especially being able to bomb down hills and just feel like I had this control of my body that I usually don't. And unfortunately, like the gym's shut down and I just wasn't invested enough in it to continue. But I'm feeling it. I'm talking to a lot of people about it, and I just want longevity. I want to be bulletproof. I want to be 60 and still strong. And I'm not going to achieve that by just running all the time. Yeah. So
I feel my best when I'm mixing and matching both strength training and aerobic conditioning. And, when people ask me what I would recommend for an exercise routine, I generally say 60 to 90 minutes day one, doing strength training, complex lifts like back squat, front squat, pulling movements, deadlift, pressing movements, shoulder to overhead, bench press. And then highly anaerobic efforts that same day, ideally right after that strength training session to, maximize your time in the gym, assault bike intervals, row intervals, ski erg intervals, burpees, something where you're spiking your heart rate in 30 to 60 seconds. And then your rest time equals your work time, do that 8 sets and you got some incredible anaerobic conditioning in. And then on the day after that, do something aerobic for 45 to 90 minutes, depending on, what your lifestyle allows you to do. That can be cycling, running, rowing, swimming, just something at that zone 2 heart rate. And that's when I feel my best. My stoke is high for both capacities, and my testosterone levels are high, energy is high, I feel strong, I feel powerful, I feel like I have endurance. It's just like a great blend of everything. Whereas in my Ironman days, I was very one-dimensional. I could go far, but I wasn't very strong. I didn't have much anaerobic power, and I feel so much more well-rounded implementing the strength training into the routine.
No, I think that's great input, and it's good for me to hear. And it's just what you just said. Like, I think I'm more where you were at right now when you were an Ironman, and I need more aerobic capacity. I need more fuel economy. I think, again, for longevity, and I think it will, in the long run, I will perform better. And I'm just happy to be open-minded and not like stuck in my ways. Like I see this as an evolution, and I'm stoked. Also, just like, I don't want to burn out. I don't want to get tired of what I do. And if I continue down this linear path of just running, like there's going to be a day where I'm going to be like, this is boring. And I don't ever want that to happen. So trying to get ahead of that before we get to that spot.
Yeah, I'm glad that you came to that place because, I mean, I got burned out from Ironman. I still bike and run, but I definitely got burned out from the swimming. And yeah, finding the, CrossFit training really helped me keep the stoke high and want to continue living a life of health and wellness. If you take two athletes, both the same weight, and one is stronger than the other, the one that is stronger is going to perform better. Strength matters 100%. And, for what you're doing, obviously durability and aerobic capacity, are way up here compared to what you need for strength. But if you can bring your strength up just a little bit, you're 100% going to perform better. And I mean, one of the things that always scared me back in the Ironman days was, if I took a week off of running, 2 weeks off of running, that I was going to lose it all. I was going to lose everything that I had built up. And I don't know if, that's something you battle with, but, having now switched between different capacities several times, like I now realize that once you build something up to a certain point, it's really, really easy to get it back. So for me, if I don't run for 6 months, if you give me 2 months of, running 3 to 4 days per week, I can get pretty damn close to where I once was with running. It
clicks back in pretty quick. Yeah. You can, the longer, the better you get at it. You can take time off and get right back to it and click back in. And something you were talking about, I think is funny from a runner standpoint. I was joking with a buddy about this the other day, or he kind of joked with me about it. He's definitely a more well-rounded athlete, such as yourself, less linear than I am, but definitely a focus on running. He's a running coach and done some really cool things. But I was like, man, I'm going to start working out. But dude, I don't want to get jacked. Like I want to stay lean for running. Mm-hmm. And he cracked up and he's like, man, it's the funniest thing to hear. He's like, you hear this out of all runners. And he's like, it's not easy. It's not like you're going to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger from going into the gym 2 days a week. Like that takes a lot of focus to build that type of mass. And as runners, we're so afraid of that happening. And it really put it in perspective for me. It's like, yeah, it's not going to happen. Like I can go and I need to hit the gym and I need to do that. And I need to quit using that as an excuse as all of a sudden I'm going to be like too bulky to be a runner. Mm-hmm. It's like that would take quite a bit.
Yeah. A, it's going to take quite a bit. And B, it's cool seeing people like Nick Bear. We chatted about BPN, these hybrid athletes that are jacked and still can do Leadville and still can run a sub 250 marathon. They're really shifting the mindset of what's possible to be both strong and have incredible endurance. And, even during the Ironman years, I was doing CrossFit type training. And for where I was finishing in the races, I looked like an anomaly. And I really think strength helped me a ton. Sure, if I wanted to, eventually win an Ironman, then I was going to have to shed more muscle because, there is a metric that every single pound is 2 seconds per mile additional on a run. That's, with no other things considered, not considering that person might have more strength or whatever, but weight does matter some. But ultimately, you can be strong, you can be pretty jacked, and you still can run fast and run far. But, also it's, it would take 5 or 6 years to put on any kind of substantial muscle where someone's going to be like, damn, you look like a bodybuilder now, Robbie. And I mean,
very intentionally too. Like you would have to be tried.
Very intentionally. You'd have to really up your calories and you'd have to really decrease your running volume. I mean, in the Ironman days, I was strength training and I only weighed 165 to 170 because I was running 50 miles a week. I mean, if you're running 50 plus miles a week, it's going to be very difficult to get really jacked.
Yeah, totally. And Nick Bear, come on now, like
freak.
Wow. Like what? Like I love that guy, and he's impressive. He really is.
Well, it just goes back to compounding consistencies, and that's what he preaches. And that is so much of what you're doing, and what Ironman was for me was just like day in and day out executing. 3 hours of training volume for Ironman. It's probably a little bit less per day with the running, just because you're breaking your body down so much. But you're saying no to a lot of things so you can say yes to one thing, and that's what it comes down to. If you do
gotta want it.
Yeah, you gotta want it. And if you do that for 5 years, years, you're going to get to this magical place, whatever it is, whether it's building a business or, you just got to dedicate every day to doing something instead of having all of these distractions and shifting gears every other week. Like, it's just really dedicating your life day in and day out to something that you want to excel in.
Absolutely.
So what's next for you? I know that you're kind of recalibrating now, coming off of, in your mind, a failure. But I think in most people's minds, running 99 miles is a pretty goddamn good accomplishment. But again,
I'm kind of right now figuring out the calendar for next year. I kind of try to break things. I try to look ahead a year and get everything in order. This past year, I think it was a disappointing year for me. I had a lot of setbacks. I had an ankle injury that just kept flaring up. I think I finally overcome that. So for the rest of the year, like we mentioned, I think I'm going to really look to more full body fitness, continue to run, but put some focus into finding a workout, like a weight routine that works for me. And then going into 2023, looking at an effort in the beginning of the year and maybe down in Mexico, more of a solo effort, about 1,100 miles, or possibly something in Japan. Still figuring out the details of that. And I'd love to do another big 100-miler mid-year. And then kind of plans for a big, audacious 3,000+ mile run at the end of the year. I can't really give a lot of details on that one quite yet. But I am planning for 2023 to kind of be my biggest year yet. For me, it's a real big statement. I'll be 38. I'm 38. It'll be my big 38th year. And I want it to be my biggest year yet. And I'm doing it. I'm setting that as a goal so that to just kind of inspire others that like we can all continue to push. Like, I'm no spring chicken, but it doesn't mean that I can't continue to get better, but also setting these big goals so that I will commit to this more full body fitness and becoming bulletproof as I continue to age. So yeah, I'm sorry to not give a lot of specific details, but expecting a pretty big year.
I love that. And I love that you're getting more into the strength training. Talk to me a little bit about the business behind what you're doing. I know that you're getting more into documentaries. People often ask me, like, what do you do for a job? So, talk to me about, how you're able to monetize your passions.
Yeah, it's been an evolution. It all started with my run across the United States. I was been pretty much just an average weekend runner. Not a little more than that. Like I was doing ultras, but when I set the intent to run across the United States, I got real serious about it. I spent a year training, and in that I found some sponsors that really believed in me. And at the time, my mission was to create conversations about better food choices and promote the efficacy of a plant-based diet. I'm a plant-based athlete. It's less of my focus of my narrative now, but at the time it was. So that allowed me to find sponsors. And since it's just continued to grow, and most of my financial security right now comes through sponsorship. But as you mentioned, I have recently started a media company. It's called Audacious Media, centered around a YouTube channel, a podcast, and a website called the Audacious Report. And the idea being is to share stories of people doing large, audacious efforts. Right now, it's predominantly focused on running, but we do want to focus on people in other modalities as well. And we kind of kicked this off with the release of a film from an effort I did last summer called the Colorado Crush, which was a 63-day effort up here in the Colorado Rockies. The film was really good. It got a really good reception on YouTube. And we've just released our second film. It's called Run Como, about my friend William Googe, who ran around Lake Como. It was a 104-mile effort in 22 hours. We're pretty sure he was the first person to run around Lake Como. Wow. And continuing to do that. So we're going to be putting out some more films over the next couple of months. We're going to re-release a couple of films. We're going to re-release a film called Paralyzed to Peaks. It's about a friend of mine who had a spinal cord injury and was told he would never walk again. And 2 years later, he summited Mount Whitney.
Incredible.
The film was really, really good, but it just didn't pick up. Nobody really got to see it. So we're going to try to get that back out to the world, as well as a film called Montauk to Manhattan about Oz Perlman. He is a mentalist, kind of like the modern day David Copperfield, but also a beast runner. And he ran 130 miles in 22 hours from in Long Island all the way into Manhattan. So those are kind of an example of the efforts that we're covering right now and going to continue to do that. We're building out storytelling around audacious events. I think it's a space that is growing. I think it's you can look back to kind of where surfing and skateboarding started, where it was very competition based in the beginning. And I think that's where running has always been. But there was a moment where people realized they didn't always have to compete. They could do things that just challenge themselves and kind of more free side of it. And that's the type of efforts that really resonate with me. And I want to bring more light to. And in that, the hope is that as we continue to build this media hub, it can democratize the ability to do these events. Because like what we just talked about, it was like, how do you do this? Well, the reason I'm able to do it is I have a social media following, and there's an economics to it. Like brands have to align themselves with people with social media followings to promote the things that they need to sell. Well, if I can create an environment where I can assure brands that I can create a story and a film around someone and it's going to get seen, then it doesn't matter if they already have the following. So we can democratize this and open it up to more talented athletes. Because let's be honest, some athletes just don't have the ability or the desire to be on social media all the time. And I understand that, but I want them to still have these opportunities. So we're just trying to build that up so that people can do these things and we can all see and share stories of people doing cool shit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that social media has given us all the opportunity to broadcast our own TV show, our own little reality TV show, and taking it a step further for you to be able to broadcast a TV show for others and allow them to do what they love. And I mean, I love your documentaries. This is the type of stuff that I consume. I enjoy watching things like this. Not only does it inspire me, but, I think it also, it motivates me to keep, pushing and trying to up the ante for myself. And also going back to, I feel like through COVID, when a lot of events were taken away from us, all of these self-challenges started coming out. And I love seeing that because I do believe that competing against yourself is so much better than competing against others. Just figure out the best version of yourself, better yourself every single day, and, be creative and figure out what is some kind of obstacle you can self-implement into your life that you need to get over. And, document it so you have that saved for yourself,
Absolutely. And it's like, and the thing about it is when you just compete against yourself, not just when you compete against yourself, we all get to do it at the level of where we are at that time. Like what's audacious for me, like again, the name of our media company is Audacious, and it's like what's audacious for me doesn't have to be audacious for you. And we all get to pick like our limit and where we're at that time and strive to do something of magnitude for ourselves. And it's no one else to judge if that's a half marathon or if that's 300 miles. And that's the beauty of it. But the important thing is that we find something where we push ourselves. A lot of growth comes from that, and we get to be the better versions of ourselves. It's really easy to be lackadaisical and complacent in life in the world we live in. We can, we talk about social media, and it has a lot of really good qualities, but you can also sit there and scroll your life away. Comparison. But find something for yourself and chase it.
Yeah, I love that. Better than yesterday, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Where can people find you, Robbie? So Audacious on YouTube, your name on Instagram, websites, anywhere else where people can find different things that you're up to or view past challenges that you've documented?
Yeah, for my personal channels, it's just my name, Robbie Balenger on Instagram, and then YouTube, and then Instagram as well. We have, and a website is at the Audacious Report. And on both of those, you'll find me and other things that I support. Those are really the best ones right now.
I love what you're up to. I love the positive energy you're putting out into the world, and I'll come down south and visit you here really soon. Thanks for coming on today.
Please do. Yeah, absolutely. It's good to chat with you, Eric.
Cheers, brother. 9 Elements listeners can receive 20% off your first Restore service using the code ELEMENTS20 when making your first appointment. That code again is ELEMENTS20 to save 20% when booking your first service at Restore.